again, everybody. Welcome to Culloton Bauer Luce and Frenemies of the People. I'm Dennis. That's Patrick. That's Eleni. Natalie is on assignment. We are sponsored by Fear and Loathing in Chicago. So much to catch up on in the world of politics and media, two of our favorite topics. And of course, we will have Sounds Terrible. Can't wait. So much going on. But first, Eleni and Patrick, just back from New York. As I think I've mentioned here before, ran the marathon in New York to raise money for Mercy Home for Boys and Girls in Chicago. And you run through all five boroughs on this grueling day. And as I was on my last mile, I thought I was killing it. But the CFO took a video of me, and it looked like 95-year-old Clint Eastwood stole my bib and was running the last mile for me. I definitely had that, what are you kids doing in front of me? Get off my lawn, kind of my feet hurt vibe. So, anyway, you start in Staten Island, and you move up through Brooklyn. You go through Queens, the Bronx, Harlem, of course, Manhattan. When I was getting dropped off in Staten Island, because I messed up the logistics of a very complicated race, the driver dropped me off in Staten Island, and it was dark 30 in the morning, and he asked if I made arrangements for a ride back. I suppose that was my opportunity, my last opportunity to get out of it. I said no, this would be on foot. You would see me in Manhattan on foot. Anyway, running the boroughs. This is a long wind-up, Eleni. My informal polling is, while we don't know what the results are at this point, voting is taking place as we record this awesome podcast. But the voters there are selecting among 34-year-old New York Assemblyman and avowed Democratic Socialist Zoran Mamdani, former Subway guardian angel Curtis Sliwa, and former New York Governor Andrew Cuomo. The last-minute poll that ran in the New York Post over the weekend said it would be close, but based on my brief jog through the five boroughs, I think Mamdani should run away with this. Brooklyn, Harlem, the Bronx, I mean, some of this Upper East Side, a lot of Mamdani vibes. It's hard to describe. It's not just the signs, although there were some funny signs. So, Eleni, if Mamdani wins, is this good news for Mayor Johnson, who maybe is just to the right, but only just slightly to the right of the potential future Mayor Mamdani?
I mean, it's tough to say. I think we're in weird times across the board right now. And I think what we're seeing right now, I guess not seeing, but more hearing, is that, the business community here on the ground is looking for a more right-centered candidate for mayor. And so at this point, you would think it would not, or it will help them. It's hard to tell right now where things are going, and just everything happening as well on the federal level is really dictating where people stand today. And I think we can't really predict right now how what happens in New York will affect our mayor's race. And we also still have a lot of time until that our race comes to be.
True, a lot of water will under the bridge. Patrick, if Governor Cuomo pulls it out, and at this hour, Real Clear polling had Mamdani up quite a bit. The New York Post had it a little bit closer. But if Governor Cuomo pulls it out, does it mean anything to Chicago?
I think it's a lesson in where the base of the voting blocks are. And so in Mamdani's case, there was such energy and excitement. It clearly crushed the Democrat primary out there. And then if a center-right coalition develops to support Cuomo or whatever that take is, I think that would be a straw poll large municipal cities across the board of what center of the Democrat base are they moving to the center? Or are they saying we're going to continue or seek to double down on enthusiastic support from more of the far left? And, would a Mayor Rahm Emanuel have a place in the Democrat Party of today? We're going to find that out as he continues to want to run for president. But, would Rahm Emanuel survive a Democrat primary in the city of Chicago right now? I think that's like an open question. So I think this whole coalescing around Cuomo, who got beat pretty handily in the Democrat primary in New York, is interesting, but we'll see how the votes come out no matter what. But if Cuomo's even somewhat competitive out there in a city that is overwhelmingly Democratic, that's also a sign. We're kind for something. Sure.
Well, fellow Chicago public affairs and political consultant Greg Goldner jumped in the last several weeks to try to turn around the Cuomo campaign for mayor. So I was not the only Chicagoan experiencing pain in New York this weekend. So we will see how that shakes out. Good luck to all the candidates. One of the funny signs I saw on the race was someone held up a sign that says, "Run like Zoran's buses, free and fast." So CTA buses will not be free, Patrick, but they will be running thanks to a last-minute transit bailout during the veto session. And Eleni, you were there. What did you pick up? What do you hear? How do we suddenly have billions of dollars to get the region's mass transit running again? Just a few days ago, they were gazillions of dollars over the brink.
Well, I think, one thing I thought of when reading Capitol Facts last week about how this came together, and it reminded me very much of 2019 during the budget and Capitol bill negotiations. And I remember we walked out of a leaders meeting and everyone was at odds and there was no deal to be made. And it wasn't until Governor Pritzker intervened and called the sides together to negotiate that we got both of those items done bipartisanly for the first time in many, many years. And so that's essentially what we saw happen with the transit bill this session. Was negotiations kept breaking down, and this is part of a pattern that we've seen and we've talked about on this show multiple times about this disconnect between the House and the Senate now in the Illinois legislature. That's something that we never really have seen in previous reigns of power and control. And so now, when the transit legislation broke down yet again, Governor Pritzker was brought in to bring all sides together and close the deal. And that is essentially what he did. Now, what's all in the fine print, we will all wait and see, as we always do. There was, some opposition, actually some union opposition as well, with, of course, some members of the minority party stating that, this is going to hurt downstate projects. And that's something that is a little bit of a theme when it comes to not just Springfield, but also messaging. But we did see that the Senate President's office said, they're going to find a way to soften the blow to the downstate road and transit projects during this coming session. So we'll wait and see if that actually happens, as we're all constantly on the edge of our seats to see what they do for all of Illinois.
So Illinois Senate President Don Harmon and Illinois Speaker of the House Emanuel Chris Welch and Governor J.B. Pritzker got together and they found billions of dollars of road funds just laying around. That's how we're funding this bailout.
That's one way to say it. Sure.
What happened to the lockbox? Can we bring back the 2000 Al Gore with the lockbox from Saturday Night Live? And that lockbox had not such a good deadbolt on it, I guess.
Well, it
My
did have a
other
lockbox for a while. Lockbox.
My favorite was, I believe it was Rich or someone else described it as the funds were so replete with cash. We had run out of projects to fund out of the road fund, so we needed, and it's quite remarkable.
So one of the other signs out at the race were, "Why are you still running?" I mean Cuomo, not you. Which I thought was funny. But speaking of still running, will the energy be running? Patrick, there was a lot of talk about an energy bill. What went down?
There was a lot of energy about an energy bill, and it passed a pretty substantial margin. So there are a couple of main takeaways for folks to take a look at. And the first is the state, after many years of talking about introducing this type of energy generation technology, is moving forward to put energy storage onto our grid. That'll be the idea being there are certain times when you have excess storage or excess energy on the grid. Take it, store it, deploy it in a 4 or 8 hour duration when demand is really needed. And overall, that it's say consumers benefit from that when you're able to not have to produce as much power at the peaks. So the state is moving forward with an initial procurement, targeting to have that wrapped up by August of 2026, and then they will move forward similar on a REC program to more things. The other big takeaways out of there were that there was a moratorium on nuclear. That's completely gone, and it's no longer limited to small modular reactors. The state is embracing the nuclear renaissance that's occurring across America. So I will just bet that we're going to see some news about some reactors sooner than later in the works, as we're home to Constellation, one of the largest fleets of nukes in America. But one of the underreported items out of the bill, which we'll all be talking about in the future, is the integrated resource plan of the Illinois Commerce Commission. And the General Assembly really has now given this state agency the responsibility to come up with plans for generation for the state, and they will begin to implement those. And then if and when the General Assembly says, whoa, 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 we don't like what you came up with, they can veto the plan with a vote of the General Assembly to say the rate hikes are too much, we need a different plan. So this will be that part of the bill, that part of this new path is the most fundamental change in our markets since deregulation. It'll be very interesting to see how it plays out over time. But there will be a lot of the docket at the ICC will be open, as they say in minutes.
So the lot of development in energy policy in Illinois and a lot of billables for regulatory lawyers in the months and years ahead. Speaking of energy and directing your energy, Eleni, Governor J.B. Pritzker, after the session ended, appeared before the Illinois Federation of Teachers and said that President Trump and his Republican allies should F all the way off. And the folks inside that meeting of union educators really got a kick out of it. But outside the union hall, as it were, there's some criticism as to whether that's the way an Illinois governor should be speaking. What do you think, Eleni?
Well,
Because you've been known to tell people to F all the way off.
I'm probably the wrong person to ask for a reasonable assessment. I think that the rhetoric is excellent, but I would say that it's interesting the audience that he chose to give those remarks to. Hearing Governor Pritzker say things like that is not the norm for him, but given what we talked about in a previous episode of the new president of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, who is a very aggressive and vocal individual, I think it is not a coincidence that the governor chose those words at that specific event. But I liked it.
I mean, it's a miracle, Patrick, that we get through this show every week without Eleni dropping numerous F-bombs.
It is.
That is true, though. I will note the duck behind her is an Easter egg for all those
But
loyal viewers over there. Yep, there he is. Unfortunately, my 3-year-old broke my
it's
duck.
my 3-year-old broke mine too, but I glued it back together.
Oh, there we
So
go.
Dennis get all my F words out of the system right before we come on. So I just scream into a pillow and then immediately jump on.
But it is interesting. I do not quite understand the branding idea that if we just swear more, we'll get the attention or we'll get the excitement. And it's perhaps I don't watch enough of the foul mouth Republicans in speeches, but it seems very it almost seems orchestrated. Like, okay, now we have to swear more on the stump and in speeches, and it's like, okay, I get it, but what end is this occurring? They must have analytics or something supporting this, I would presume, or they really just are at the effing boiling point. But it is, to me at least, it seems like the increase in swearing in official appearances is on one side more than the other, and I'm not quite sure what the strategic messaging objective is.
Well, there's definitely been a coarsening of the political debate in the Trump era. And I don't know, I could be giving them too much credit, but the Pritzker political machine is pretty good at message testing and polling. So I'm guessing telling the president to F off on occasion plays pretty well, at least at this stage of playing to the base.
Could you imagine being a pollster and you get like a quote from a client and it's like, okay, we're going to message test this. Can you test? He's the tyrannical dictator. Okay. Let's just tell him piss off. Okay. Now let's do that. Oh, yeah. I'm getting paid to ask people which version of Go Pound Sand do you find most waging and active?
Not that far removed from the weird way we make a living, I suppose. Speaking of making a living, Stacey Davis Gates, as you mentioned earlier, Eleni, did get a bit of a pay boost now that she is also the Illinois Federation of Teachers president and the Chicago Teachers Union president. And Bob Herguth at the Sun-Times wrote over the weekend that as she expands her clout by taking over as the head of the statewide teachers union, the new job may allow her greater access to another large pot of campaign money, just as her ally Mayor Johnson prepares to run for re-election. And the Sun-Times believes that there could be millions there because the IFT and the AFT have given more than $2 million to Mayor Johnson since 2018. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think she will have a lot of control over significant sums of cash and where it goes. And, we saw this in the last mayoral cycle, just the power of CTU in our city's election. And I think now we're going to probably see a lot more engagement in political races now that now that she has a hand in IFT as well.
It's only fair on a statewide basis if all of the road funds pay for the CTA, why not just have all the teacher dues pay for the mayor race in Chicago? We're just spreading the love from across the state to Chicago.
Well, before we get to our favorite episode of Sounds Terrible, I want to talk about what sounds kind of tasty and delicious and awesome. So, Manny's, the West Side Deli in Chicago, is offering 300 SNAP recipients, a free sandwiches, so free pastrami, a potato pancake, pickles, and a soft drink. And they've started a GoFundMe page to help keep that going. Apparently, on the first day they did this, the lines were out the door at 5 a.m. in the morning, which just shows you how much people are worried about and depend upon those nutritional supplements of the SNAP program. And there are several other Chicago restaurants, including Kale, My Name, and Soul's Food Lounge. I guess, I've been to Manny's Deli a few times. Can't go wrong there. I'm probably the only one on this podcast that eats a lot of kale. I guess the only downside of having your benefits, your food nutrition come from Manny's is that there's a very good chance you're going to have to shake hands with politicians.
You also missed on that list, you didn't read this off, Dennis, is October Cafe. That is a local joint right here across the Norwood Park train station that is also
kidding.
offering some free meals for folks that are in need. And also Windy City Community Church that is just down the street from my house, which I volunteer at the food pantry, is always looking for donations, particularly right now. So if anybody listening to this, other than the three of us, has any canned goods or anything they'd like to deliver, I will come get them from you. So let me know.
How about that, Patrick? Effing Lenny has an effing heart, after all, out there on the northwest side.
Somewhere in here.
Open the effing government up, people.
Yeah.
Open it up. This is the
Agreed.
stupidest thing I've ever seen.
It's only going to get dumber from here, Patrick. So buckle up.
You're talking about the government, not frenemies. So, Producer Grace, it's time for It Sounds Terrible. Can't wait. All right. So, let's start with the Queen of Terribleness, because I got something that's pretty terrible to conclude with.
I'm scared we're going to have the same terrible.
No, I think I'm going to have a unique terrible.
Okay. What I think is pretty terrible is Governor Pritzker has a piece of legislation on his desk that he's trying to decide right now on, I don't even know what to call it entirely, but on assisting terminally ill patients on ending their lives. And I think that is, of all the terribleness going on right now, a pretty terrible decision to have to make one way or the other. And that to me is my sounds terrible. And I really want to know what you guys can do to beat something like that.
Well, there's, two things in Illinois that are inevitable: death and taxes. So let's just accelerate that timetable. I think is what the thinking is there. So it's a good way out. Patrick, that's pretty terrible. Death is pretty terrible.
It is pretty terrible. Last week, I randomly opened related to Atlantis, and I'll get to mine. I randomly opened the history of the grave or the coffin bell that was installed in the 1800s. Like, there was a whole industry because people were so worried that they were buried in a coffin before they were dead, and there would be a little bell you could pull. I learned all about this like 2 weeks ago. The simulation is glitching because that was just a precursor to the right to perish bill or whatever the heck they're calling it. But wild stuff. But my sounds terrible is Life is Imitating Art, Planet of the Apes, the truck overturned, wild apes and chimpanzees were let loose on the people down south, and I'm getting real nervous that we just keep imitating all of these movies. And Fail Safe was pretty good, some of these other ones, but we don't need to get to the brink of human extinction. Let's just slow down. We don't need to replay all the greatest hits. Let's just focus on keeping track of the monkeys that are being transported all over, and we don't need them to become hyper intelligent, AI driven.
Where did this truck of monkeys fall over?
I believe it was in like Louisiana.
My goodness.
Could you imagine like walking out of your house and you're like used to the wildlife, and then there's like a rabid monkey trying to get you? That would be
What if they get access to AI? Could happen.
I'm going to be out of a job if that monkey gets access to AI. I'm being replaced.
Monkey with a keyboard. End of Skarr. All right, so here's something that I noticed that was pretty terrible when I was running through the 5 boroughs doing my political polling. In the old slow guy wave that I was running in, there was a guy running barefoot. through the through the. I wouldn't even like. I took my shoes off before I got back to my hotel room because I didn't want to track the 5 boroughs into the hotel. It's it's there's a lot of different substances out there, especially on a day like that. And this guy was doing it barefoot, and as far as I know, completed
Yeah.
it. So I'll do more research on that. But that is pretty terrible. And I would say if it's terrible, it's CBL's frenemies of the people. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Don't forget to drop us an email. We've got the directions right here. Producer Grace will pop it on the screen. And we want to hear why you think we're terrible, for sure. Until next time, we'll see you then.